Okay, welcome to the Bellevue School District regular board meeting. I'm calling this meeting to order on December 15th, 2020. We'll start the meeting with roll call. I'm Francine Wiest.
Carolyn Watson.
Christine Chu.
Erica Malik.
Seema Sarafan.
And Ivan Duran.
Okay, and then we have a student with us here today who's Lily Kim, who's going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance and our land acknowledgement.
Okay, here I go. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We acknowledge, honor, and respect that our broad community of Bellevue School District students, families, educators, and staff live and learn on the traditional indigenous land of the Coast Salish peoples. We thank the caretakers of this land who have lived here and continue to do so since time immemorial. Sorry.
Thank you. Well, that's excellent. So we are would also just like to acknowledge during this time that it is our last school board meeting for 2020, and after this soon people will hopefully go to a well-deserved break. And we just acknowledge that there are many different beliefs in our district, but overall we hope that a value of taking care of oneself, spending time with those you care about, taking the time to acknowledge and share that gratitude is important, and a time that is coming up for all of us in the district. So with that, I'm going to call for the Board of Directors. Are there any changes to the agenda? All right, hearing none. Motion to approve the agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Any opposed to the agenda? Any opposed to the agenda? All right. The agenda is approved. So now we'll go on to our student report. So for a fuller introduction, I'd really like to welcome Lily Kim, who is a senior at Sammamish High School, who has been involved in Veterans Day assembly coordinations across our district, who is part of our Superintendent's Advisory Council as a student member, and who is here to tell us a little bit more about a project that she's involved with. So Lily, thank you so much for being with us here today, your involvement, and to provide a student perspective.
Thank you for having me. So yeah, my name is Lily Kim. I go to Sammamish. Go Totems. Something that I've really been focusing on and something I've always been passionate about is student mental health and well-being. So I started this club last year. It's called Mindfulness Club, and we meet once a week, and it focuses on, it's a safe space for students to just talk about how they've been feeling, how they're doing, and what we can help. And on top of that, we practice mindful strategies such as meditation, mindful stretching. Our advisors sometimes take us through walks in the forest, over Teams, so that's kind of nice. I just wanted to take this time that I have with the board to really emphasize the importance of student well-being. I know the Bellevue School District is one of the best districts in the country, and I know because of our test scores and our academics that's so, but I think that you can't put academics and test scores over student well-being, especially because you are a school district, and so you have to pay attention to your students. We might be one of the best districts in the country for academics, but we also have to be that for our students as well. So I think as you consider moving into your decisions, you really should think about how this will affect the students, and you need to make them your priority, because your students won't do well for you if you don't do well for them. So thank you so much for your time.
Lily, thank you so much for your time and your words, and certainly as a board and a district, Students are the primary reason why we are all here. So systems need to work for those who are in them, and we definitely appreciate and value the student perspective and hope to hear from you and your peers and reach out to us. So thank you. All right, so moving on to our agenda, the next thing up is the consent agenda. You'll note that the minutes for the last meeting will be presented at the following meeting in January. Are there any other comments for the consent agenda? All right, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
All right, great. Any opposed? Any opposed? All right, the consent agenda is approved. And so we'll move on to the superintendent update.
All right, very good. Thank you. Yeah, so I want to just hit on a few things and then spend more time when we get to item 6, talking about return to school, where we are with COVID. But I think first and foremost, wanted to inform everyone that we did make an announcement yesterday that we will be returning to more in-person services for our K through 2 students. We made that announcement yesterday. We held a Teams meeting with our K through 2 educators, and other educators joined us for that call, and we sent a message out following that meeting. But we spent the time just to try to share a little bit around the why and give more information about what we're trying to accomplish with students coming back. Following that meeting yesterday, our school leaders hosted sessions after the announcement to discuss what supports and questions educators had in regards to the announcement. As I shared yesterday, we are not making this decision lightly. It's something that we have been really planning for months in terms of what we've been trying to accomplish. And after nearly 10 months of remote learning, we have learned a lot, and we have also learned on the supports, and we have seen some real success with some of the in-person service that we've been able to provide to some of our students. When we take the physical distancing numbers and follow some other risk mitigation in places. I think when we scheduled classes at the beginning of the year, we anticipated bringing our youngest learners back, and we made classes as small as possible from the very beginning. And as you all know, since September, we have been increasing the number of in-person services, and we are now serving, approximately 600 students at all classroom levels and about 2,000 students in athletics. I think there's been some questions around, like in October when we made the decision to delay reopening, why we're making a decision now. But I think at that time, we were working to ensure that we had all the pieces together. And I think just as a reminder for everyone, at that time, we had a lot of different guidance and requirements that we had to follow. So since that time, we've learned a lot, and currently, we are operating under guidance and requirements from a number of agencies, including, Washington State Department of Health and the decision tree for K through 12 students returning to in-person learning. King County Public Health and their guidance and recommendations. The governor's had emergency orders and phase reopenings and different requirements. Labor and industry has weighed in with their requirements. Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction has had guidance and some requirements. And of course, Occupational Safety and Health Administration. So we've really been able to learn, a lot during that time, and it has really been, helpful for us to continue making our plans. I also think it's important because, as we've shared yesterday and what we continue to share, is that although we have had some positive cases in our classrooms that have reopened, we have not had the spread in our buildings, and that is something that is real important that I think really needs to continue to be emphasized as something that we are really monitoring regularly, because we know our risk mitigation protocols and are working, and specifically those folks in cohorting, masking, and physical distancing. So as a reminder, for the board, our K through 2 will be returning in a staggered schedule, starting with second graders, first, and then all day, half day, an AB schedule. And then our students will be placed in small cohorts with their classrooms, and we expect, 8 to 10 students. And then we will continue to look for ways to bring other students in person and hope to expand in-person learning opportunities for the students. And then as another reminder, we are going to be surveying our K through 2 families to identify which students will be returning in person, and we have a follow-up plan to get to those who don't respond to a survey tool that we are using. So we definitely have been thinking about who's going to respond, who's not going to respond, but we want to make sure that we are getting, input from, all of our parents and our families at this time. And then I also would just say that, we would like to remind, our learning community that the health and safety protocols are easily accessible from our district webpage. And, there's a button labeled COVID-19 health and safety. And additionally, the health check link for attestations is that type of every district webpage. And I think these resources are going to be especially important as we welcome back more students for in-person services. And then we will be sending out a end of year video message to all staff and families tomorrow that will be available in English, Chinese, and Spanish for those that prefer to read that. And then finally, the last thing I'll share is that we are preparing for our staff and families for the first ever State of the District. There'll be 2 events, one for staff and one for families on January 13th. So we'll be putting more information out that when we return from the break, and attendees will be able to hear about the challenges and opportunities that face our learning communities. So really look forward to putting that together so that we can share some of the work that we're doing and some of the plans that we have in place. So thank you very much.
Can you hear me? Oh, great. Okay. Mute button. All right, thank you very much. So that brings us to public comment. So I'm going to read the public comment guidelines as we queue those up. We have received a number of them today. The board has accepted public comments for this meeting via online written submissions and will share up to 3 minutes of each comment as read by the board coordinator or other designee of the board. To maximize the number of comments read, if there are more than 3 comments, the board president may shorten the number of minutes of each comment to be read. The board will listen to all comments carefully, but will generally not respond to comments spontaneously or without further deliberation. Complaints about specific personnel will not be heard in open session and will not be part of the record of any public meeting. Harassing or derogatory statements about any persons or groups of persons will not be heard. All public comments submitted online and in compliance with stated requirements, whether or not they are read aloud during the meeting, will be included as part of the official record for the next regular board meeting following receipt of the comments. Given that we have, I believe, over 100 comments, we will be reading a minute or less for each comment and get in as many as possible, representing a broad variety of the themes that were that came through in the comments. Ms. Bateman, I turn it over to you.
Sorry, I can share my screen here and get the timer teed up so I give everybody the right amount of time. So, dear board directors, I strongly support the district's proposal to offer in-person education for grades K-2 starting in January. I strongly urge you to please stick with this proposal and please consider moving forward with other grade levels. Our kindergartners has been struggling with hours of time on an iPad and cannot even write his name or hold a pencil properly. My 4th grader is despondent and routinely has 10 to 20 missing math assignments and does not even know her basic multiplication tables or how to spell properly. None of our kids are getting any skills with pencil and paper. Routinely, we find them watching YouTube on their respective devices instead of learning and have no way to intervene. We are strongly considering withdrawing our 4th grader for a private school in the area because of the lack of a concise timeline and lack of learning, which my family has graciously offered to pay for. We used to love BSD and never would have considered other options before this. Unfortunately, there are no spots in 7th grade, so our oldest is stuck with online learning. Online learning isn't from Rebecca DeBroglio. As a high school student, I can speak for my peers when I say that I hate online learning. Many of my friends are anxious and good students are now failing. Many students have told me they wish they could go back in person and their family supports it. But they're too scared to speak up for fear of backlash. This sort of community response disappoints me as I learned that by moving to Bellevue, a place where the school board takes in scientific facts and the public, I strongly support the district's proposal to offer an in-person learning option to students in January and move quickly and decisively. More needs to be done options to the rest of our student body. Rebecca DeBroglio. not sure what that noise is in the background. So I think someone's got their microphone on. Someone else does. Okay. From Sarah Jade. I support the district's proposal to offer an in-person learning option to K-2 students in January. My children are among those suffering from a lack of school, and I can't wait to see their faces brighten again. However, this proposal is not nearly enough for several reasons. The proposal is only 2.5 hours per day, 4 days per week. This is less than a half normal school hours. It does not include lunch or recess, essential school day activities for young people. It doesn't include any children beyond second grade at all. This hybrid-like approach leaves most of the day for taking children into the community at higher risk coronavirus transmission areas in school. It is only a proposal. We've been promised in-person school twice already this school year, so I have no faith that you will not cave to fear and hysteria. Our children are suffering, especially mine. I'm glad my second grade twins may go back to school in January, but this half-hearted approach's lack of urgency and inclusion is appalling. From Kyle Rummergarden. Dear School Board and Dr. Duran, I'm a teacher at Spirit Ridge Elementary as well as a resident in Bellevue. My daughter goes to Woodridge Elementary. Please do not send whole grade levels back to school until the community spread of COVID-19 has fallen back into the moderate range below 75 cases per 100,000. Educators care deeply about the health and safety of our students and their families. Community spread is the highest it has ever been right now. We all need to do our part to stay home and take care of each other so our medical workers can take care of those who are sick. What we are doing in virtual learning is safe and works for most students and families. We have already negotiated a plan with the district to identify families that are under undue burden and stress from virtual school and to work with them to get them the support and services. In-person should be limited to only families that have needs that cannot be met in virtual in order to make in-person as safe as possible. We need to do what is best for learning. I and other elementary educators have worked tirelessly since the beginning of the year to connect. All right, and from Casey, dear Bellevue School Board District of Directors, I urge you to please reconsider reopening until the numbers are lowered for a safe re-entrance that you repeatedly shared with us throughout the year. I'm concerned that the numbers do not support the legal graphics that we shared a few months back. Clearly states that the threshold is greater than 75. Today we are over 400. Why now? What was sent out yesterday has changed the graphic criteria. Have our K2 been reclassified? Assign our K2 with early learners so that we can flex the criteria is unsettling. The risk to represent staff, their families, and the greater an uneasy feeling for the families you promised to protect. Please do not approve or endorse the reopening plan in any way. Thank you, Casey Williams. From Lakshmi Venu. Dear board members, today one of my child's classes had a lesson that was challenging to grasp. The teacher is great and strives to explain it, but the tough concepts are much harder to teach online. At the end, one student put a comment into the chat that referenced an act of violence. Chats cannot be deleted and the whole class may have read it. This is one example of the toll of online classes to both students and teachers. I'm thankful for your plan to open K2 for an in-person option, but it falls short for most families. Although you are sending emails with a plan, the color boxes and infection rates do not mean anything to students or their families. We want to know when and how you will open an in-person option for middle and high school. Based on your silence and opaque information, it's very hard to know whether you understand the pain that students, families, and some teachers who feel they are silenced by the union are experiencing. Parents whom I have never met have written or called me with the following. One or more children are feeling depressed. The child is getting activities once found fun and now is detached to not talking to others. From Nicole Kelly. Last night, teachers from Bellevue School District were informed that Superintendent Duran had made the decision that all second grade children will be returning to class on 1/12/2021. This action was done without working with teachers, the union, or with any regard to federal county guidelines. This decision is not in line with other King County schools and seems random at best. I am not a school teacher, but many of my family and friends are, and we are scared. This decision isn't about what's best for kids or families or teachers. If it were, the district would be talking to teachers, all parents, and the surrounding community. Instead, I fear that they are listening to one loud group of parents, and one group of parents should not dictate the face of many. While I have heard the argument about kids needing socialization, I do not hear any concern for people impacted by COVID brought home through school-aged children. Parents who argue kids need to be in school before it is safe seem to forget that for many, the risk of COVID is more than just concern over health. It is also concerned about not being able to afford. And from Veronica Mesner-Dreyer. Dear BSD Board, I beg of you to set aside any bias and consider the scientific evidence as well as a broad consensus recommendation from epidemiologists, physicians, and pediatricians. We need to get young students back in the classroom full-time as soon as possible. The harm being done to K2 students from virtual education is by far greater than the potential risk of sending students into school. Not only are young students least likely to transmit the virus to adults, they are also disproportionately suffer from virtual school. A kindergartner doing school on an iPad is just wrong. Not only is this medium wholly inappropriate for this age group, but working parents cannot effectively provide the supervision necessary for it to work on any level. I have postponed my career to teach my kindergarten nurse, and she cannot handle the virtual screen for more than 45 minutes. This is just not possible for most parents and is creating huge financial and emotional hardships, not to mention disproportionately harming the careers. While it is great to see the plans for K2 in-person learning, can we also hear about the plan for the rest of elementary school and where we are in the plan for further expansion? Further, 1, have the schools identified any staffing gaps? If they do exist, what is the mitigation plan? Can we bring in parent volunteers to help with teaching? Let's be honest, many parents have already learned how to be full-time teachers at this point. We can't let teacher opposition stop what our kids need. There has to be a way to work around that. Do we have an update with our teachers whether our teachers are able to receive the vaccine? Can we work to get COVID tests that helps our teachers feel confident? I know there are ways to get the saliva test kits. Can we have them distributed on the first day? I can get this process documented from another school district that has reopened with a hesitant teacher population. Are there any PPD needs? I'm happy to get additional masks for the schools that are reopening. Thanks for the work, dear board members. Valerie. Can we have time for one more or not?
No.
Thank you.
Okay, that concludes our time. Thank you very much for reading those. We appreciate the time our entire community of students, families, and educators takes to write and share their comments, concerns with us. We have certainly received a lot of input, and we do read everything we receive as individual board directors, even if it's not read during this time. It will be part of the record. All right, so moving on, the next piece on our agenda is the curriculum adoption. Dr. Duran, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, and I believe I will be turning this over either to Sharon Couts or Eric Ferguson.
Good evening, Eric
go.
Ferguson. I think I will take this, and if Sharon needs to kind of answer any questions as well. So good evening, Board of Directors. Eric Ferguson, one of the teaching and learning directors. What I'm proposing to you is a memo that summarizes our instructional materials committee meetings. What I'm presenting tonight, or what I'm sharing with you tonight, is that our social studies department has gone through a year-long process of looking and revising their middle school materials. Patty Shelton actually originally anticipated bringing this to the Instructional Materials Committee last spring. However, due to COVID and not being able to have enough input from students, from teachers, from families, she delayed bringing it to the committee. So what I want to share with you is that we met on November 16th, and she presented a slide deck that actually shared multiple proposals. So she was reviewing with a team of teachers that were consistent of every middle school, as well as there were some parents involvement, as well as some student surveys. And what they did was they were relooking at the 6th grade, the 7th grade, and the 8th grade curriculum materials. In the end, what happens is I have recommendations for just 2 courses. So the 7th grade and the 8th grade, they're staying with the same publisher that they've been using in the past, so there's no reason to bring it to you for approval. But within the 6th grade, they felt that they needed to make a change, and they were actually specifically grounded in why they needed to make a change. And I just want to read something to you real quick off of one of their slides. Is they first started with their mission, is the criteria that the teachers need to look into consideration is that they have a capacity to support all students' needs at home, ELL, special ed, advanced learning. The text is a resource to help the instructors to teach a common objective and standards. It may serve as a guide to instruct while teachers supplement with additional vetted materials. The ebook version was really a critical piece. The ebook is a required aspect. It needs to be grade level appropriate, it needs to be culturally responsive. It absolutely needed to have a Spanish edition, and it needed to have strong ancillary materials, being the website and online resources. So what I'm bringing to you tonight is that they presented to the Instructional Materials Committee. Our Instructional Materials Committee made sure they followed the procedures in Procedure 2020. And the recommendation is that they would like to have the National Geographic, which is produced by Cengage, for their 6th grade curriculum. And there was information that they shared from student surveys, from teacher feedback, from some parent feedback. And the other aspect that I wanted to also point out was within both that 6th grade adoption, when they looked at critical criteria of policy 0130, there were 3 questions that they really focused in and specifically addressed. Those 3 questions are which student groups, e.g. racial, ethnic, students with disabilities, English language learners, are most affected by this policy program? What are the potential impacts for these groups? Does this policy program ignore or worsen existing disparities or produce other consequences that may impact any particular student groups, and how? And then the final one was, how does this policy/program promote opportunity access for those that have been historically excluded? And so taking that policy, they followed it. And so the recommendation was to use the National Geographic for 6th grade. Questions about 6th grade before I talk about the international school piece?
Any questions?
And I can go back to, you can, if there are other questions, if there's questions that surface. Yes, Christine.
So you said you reviewed those particular questions. I'm wondering like what you learned, because I wonder how effective our critical criteria are at differentiating between different curriculum resources, because my experience is often that they all have some issues. And so trying, like, was the one you're recommending perfect? Did it seem like it was totally equitable and varied and multi-perspective or whatever? And also, is there any tool that you're using beyond critical criteria that is specific to reviewing curriculum materials to make sure that they are not just equitable, but they're also like they involve more perspectives, etc. Some of the things that we have as goals. So just want to know if this is a sufficient tool for you or not.
So we actually, what was really helpful was another publisher, Pearson. Their materials weren't available in Spanish, and that actually just immediately almost disqualified that as a viable source. And so I think we've always had a bias review. We have some checklists that we've used as a bias review. One of the things that we're doing is we're looking to say, do we need to strengthen our bias review because of policy 0130. But I think that we're using it to then inform our work. There absolutely is no perfect resource out there. And I think that's where Patty Shelton and her social studies team are realizing, is there something that's the best of what we can find? And then if there's something, and one of the real critical pieces that part of the IMC, I have one of the representatives, Ken Wong, who really offers a perspective of pushing back on all of our teams around, are we serving, is this resource really serving students? Is this resource really supporting our most marginalized learners? And so we do kind of ask those questions, and I think there's no perfect book or perfect novel or perfect text, but I think that the critical criteria is absolutely helping us kind of do a better job vetting it for all of our students currently. Does that help?
Yes, thank you so much.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Yep.
Are there any other questions? Okay, because I did want to ask, so it did say that time was spent gathering data from stakeholders, students, families, and educators. However, on the adoption committee, there's no list of any students or families or community members. And so I wanted to ask a little bit more about that, and then just taking a step back and saying, does this completely replace existing materials? Is it an addition? What happens if teachers don't want to use this? They want to keep using what they're currently using. And then my third question is a little bit follow up on what Dr. Chu said, which is that you know, it looks like there wasn't really a comparison to anything except what was existing. So really this was the default. And so if it does have flaws, you know, what are some of those and how will they be mitigated so that, you know, was it perfect, or were there flaws and there are steps in place to mitigate them?
So really good questions. So the instructional materials committee, the kind of sounding board, which is made up of 9 members, which does not include students, but does have parent representation on it, is really kind of the committee that makes sure that these subcommittees, these adoption committees, have been following the process in 2020P. And so when I did say that Patty Shelton had grade level committees for each one of her grades, and then International School had its own committee, and part of those committees then included teachers in the school, an administrator from the school. Sometimes it had it actually had a special education educator. It had a multi-language learner voice on it. And then it usually doesn't have students as members of the committee. It has student voice and choice and feedback in the process. And so with this 6th grade material, we had been previously using the Pearson text. And when they were reviewing and deciding what we should potentially use, and when the Pearson materials weren't available in Spanish, quite honestly, the Highland teachers in the dual language program said, you know, we really can't even use Pearson. We're only going to pilot the Cengage because these other materials are so subpar. And so the feedback, so that was immediate feedback we were getting from a dual language program. So each of our adoption committees has parent involvement, has student involvement in it. But then when they bring it to the IMC, the Instructional Materials Committee, which we only meet 3 times a year, and then are able to bring recommendations to you board members. And so we really are just ensuring that the process was followed, and we do want to make sure that, and one of the things that I've been doing more of is when a curriculum developer talks about beginning to look and pilot new materials, I meet with them and say, okay, so let's talk about what's the scope of your project? Is it a single course? Is it for one school? Is it for all schools? Is it for multiple grades? And so the larger the project, the larger we absolutely need to have involvement from the community, from schools, from BEA educators. So the second example, which when I talk a little bit about international school doesn't have the ability to, they loop their social studies curriculum, so they have a 6-7 loop. And so that pilot in itself is a different course than all of our other middle schools. And so they were doing their own pilot, and they then were conducting it. And actually what they did was, International School actually brought their materials to the Instructional Materials Committee last spring. And our Instructional Materials Committee at the time felt like there wasn't enough information to feel comfortable that they followed the process. And so we actually informed International School. We said, okay, this is good. However, we don't have enough information from parents. We don't have enough student information here and student data. And so we said, you need to go back, and we didn't recommend that we could bring this forth. And so International School went back, and they had been working with the publisher again this fall, and then they were able to submit more data to the IMC, which shared perspectives, and we felt like they then had followed the process, and it was I feel comfortable recommending it, which I didn't feel last spring when they originally wanted to present it to us and then to you.
Okay, so just to clarify, in the memo, I understand the IMC, but then it says adoption committee, and under the adoption committee, those stakeholders are not listed. And so it appears that they were not engaged, especially under the 6th grade, the grade 6 adoption. Under international, there's a little bit more subtext. And so that's why I just really wanted to clarify that, in fact, those stakeholders were involved in this process. So even though they're not listed under adoption committee, you're saying they were involved.
Yes, and so I can tell you that, and I'm looking at a separate screen of that I had of the 6th grade survey. There were I'm just trying to see what the N, I'm sorry, I have to blow this up because my eyes are getting old. Oh, where's my N? Of the parents, the N for parent feedback, there were only 13 parents that gave feedback. But for the student side, there were like 113 students that gave feedback to the 6th grade.
Okay, thank you. And then to the other questions, this will now completely replace existing social studies text for 6th grade, and then the 6-7 loop if we do both of these. Is that correct? There's no other alternative. This completely replaces?
That is correct. And that is why it's really critical that BEA membership and teachers are part of these committees, because we need to do this with them. We can't do something to them. So we would never adopt or change a text or any instructional materials without having classroom teachers as part of that review process.
Okay, and then to the last point, did you find that there are lessons that need additional scaffolding to really truly meet the spirit and intent of our critical criteria and what we want to make sure, especially in social studies curricula, that there aren't unintended consequences of certain images or the way certain paragraphs are phrased in the textbook? Were there any of those? And if so, what steps would be taken to mitigate any consequences to those?
So when we pilot materials, we're not able to teach the entire textbook. We're only able to do a section of it, and so what we need to do is we need to try to review as many chapters as we can, and we look for things that are red flags. And so what we're also trying to do is, with kind of our equity work, we're also trying to help our educators be aware of situations when they're reading the chapter and they're planning for their lesson. They can look at the images, they can look at the resources, but if there were resources or there were materials that were flagged as significant problems, we would have trouble bringing it forward for recommendation. So I would tell you that I feel comfortable, but I would also tell you that honestly, we didn't. The adoption teams did not go through every single page on every single text.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions? Dr. Chu?
I actually have a comment that I think is really important. I would like to recognize that the curriculum department and the social studies group in particular have been a pioneering force in integrating the considerations of equity into the work that's actually done in the district for the past at least half a decade. And I want to note that not only are they looking at bias, they're also looking at breadth of perspectives, making sure that we have the contributions of a diverse set of people acknowledged in our curriculum. They are finding supplemental materials when the core materials aren't all there, and we've been getting very creative. And I want to call that out because it's something we want to build on, and I really appreciate this discussion and honesty tonight. I also appreciate the point that Francine brought up, and would just like to also reiterate that it is important that that what you said, training our teachers to recognize issues when they happen, and then making sure that we have tools for addressing those in a good way. That is important because the offerings of materials are imperfect. So this is a living, breathing process, and I just want to thank you guys and recognize your work. And I don't know if you need a motion, Francine. So if you want a motion, I motion that we approve the materials as presented.
Well, so I'll second that, and then we can continue discussing. I want to make sure, have you completed the presentation? We kind of snuck international in there. Is there anything else that you want to make sure you've presented? And then we'll take Director Watson next. But I just want to make sure we presented everything.
I didn't give you the memo is there. The same process was followed for the international school curricula. And we felt that it was comfortable. We were comfortable making the recommendation. The difference with our international school course is that it's doing a human geography. And the one piece that I will note is the recommendation was to approve a book that is actually an AP human geography book. But this is one of the aspects that they did a lot of discussion around was the reading level, an appropriate reading level. And the students felt like it was, but also being that it was a National Geographic, the images also are such a powerful representation of part of the story. So the teacher, Tamara, wasn't overly concerned of it being an AP book, and she felt like her students felt like they could handle it and it wasn't above their level, but I just wanted to note that for your consideration.
Great, thank you. Director Watson.
Yes, so the information that we've been presented has convinced me that this will be a fine choice. And but as I'm thinking about curriculum, I just wanted to raise something from a sort of higher vision level, that as board members, we're often talking about this particular novel, this particular textbook, or maybe it's the math tech book or whatever, but it seems like it's a piece here and a piece there. And I'm wondering if we can ever have a discussion about, like, what is the sequence in social studies? Why are we doing human geography and we're not doing, I don't know, sociology or African studies or, whatever it is? And I actually can formulate some good reasons for this, because I know that this is very good groundwork for world history, and, and it's multicultural. There's reasons. So it's just that this is an example, but we never really look at curriculum overall, and I think that's something community sometimes expects that a school board does know or is really familiar with why those choices are made over the whole K-12 spectrum in the different subjects.
Great question, and a great example with social studies is that some of the courses that are taught at certain grade levels are also I guess required by OSPI. So Washington State history and is in 8th grade. It
Right.
needs to be taught in 4th grade, in 8th grade, and in 10th grade. And so then so there's certain courses that are required in the high
Right.
school level at certain years for social studies. Within just social studies, there are state standards, and those state standards, then some of them get as specific as grade levels. But more so they kind of put themselves in bands. And so what our curriculum department does at working with teachers is they try to put a logical story and a sequence for how those topics tie together and how they would then lead to many of the topics that you'll find students will discover or use in elementary school. They will review them again in middle school, and then they'll go even deeper in high school. And one of the aspects that we do a lot of professional development with teachers is to make sure that teachers can tell the story to a 9th grader to say, hey, remember when you were in 6th grade, you were doing this unit. Now, as a freshman, we're going to take it and we're going to go a lot deeper. And so it's super important for our educators to kind of know that story, that vertical story of the topics and the themes. And that's part of professional development that we do. When you look in our course catalog that's on the website, one of the things that I find is super helpful to share with families is there's a graphic organizer in front of each content area, and you can kind of see the sequence of what's a 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, and those topics, and then generally there's a description underneath which will share with you those topics. And that's a helpful guide that I share with families when they're trying to unpack and they're new to the school district.
Yeah, I've seen those flowcharts, but I would be interested sometime, put a pin in it, that school board could come back and look at that curriculum as a overall thing.
Why don't we say that, so I've heard Director Watson express that if other directors are interested in exploring that topic more, for example, in a study session, just let me know. I think what it does raise pursuant to today's study session is that when we talk about a next step for a student, it's not always year over year. So for example, students who are in one of those years, 4th, 8th grade, 10th grade, or 4th and 8th grade, for example, we may not see the effects of their what happened in terms of their learning standards this year for several years, because when those 4th graders become 8th graders, if they don't have as much of the background content that is expected, that's something that comes a few years later. So I think that's just something to keep in mind as we go through this unusual time. Are there any other comments, or can I take a vote? All right, all those in, okay, we're doing it in the negative. Are there any opposed to adopting the recommendations as listed in the memo? Any opposed? Okay, seeing none, the recommendations pass. Thank you very much for your time in the presentation.
Thank you. That was
Thank you very much.
Okay, so that brings us to item 6 on the agenda, COVID adjusted learning updates. So directors, we receive information around what is going on with differences in COVID. It is an open time right now, unless Dr. Duran, you have a specific thing that has come up recently that you want to propose to the directors. Otherwise, we leave it open. Does anyone have clarifying questions, need additional information, or would like to propose a particular area to delve into more deeply around COVID adjusted learning updates? Dr. Chu.
I just have one small item I want to call out, and then I don't know, the other one is advocacy that Director Serafin has brought up a couple times, and so did Superintendent. So I don't know if we want to talk about that here or down during the board work when the legislative committee is going to bring you some advocacy work But that's one. And the other one, I just want to note, we spent a lot of time really advocating for taking care of our seniors recently. But I want to be clear that we need, when we do that sort of advocacy, we need to do it equitably. And there is a piece of the senior puzzle that I just want to call to attention. I don't have a big thing about, and I just want to make sure, are we addressing the financial aid, the FAFSA, for our kids who don't have that? Because right now we've done the critical work potentially to go ahead and get the college application and that sort of process done. But have we addressed the support for FAFSA work for those students who the financial aid will be a big picture of whether or not they're able to take the next steps? I just wanted to get a quick answer on that and make sure it had attention. I don't need a big answer.
Yeah, and Dr. Chu, you might want to just articulate for those who are listening who may not know what FAFSA is.
Yeah, I was saying that's the financial aid piece for applying to college. So it's a federal financial aid application form that allows access to grants and loans that kids can get at colleges.
Dr. Duran, comments?
Yep, I'd say Eva, I'm not sure, I don't have details of Patty's on, so Dr. Sigworth can address that question. Thank you.
Sure, thank you for that. To date this year, we've facilitated a minimum of 4 workshops and sessions, one of which we focused an all-day session, and we have taped each of those sessions for our students and our parents and guardians and caretakers to access. And every Wednesday, we have supports available to individuals that need assistance in filling those out, and they can access supports from our college and career advisors. Approximately 3 weeks ago was the financial aid day, and we did a lot of highlighting. We had a lot of activity. It was actually sponsored by an outside person through facilitation of us with other districts, and we by far had the highest % of attendance and participation in that. And we've had a ton of people accessing that after as well. So if we have individuals that we hear are in need of support, we do have facilitated guidance one-on-one for those families and those kids every Wednesday as well. And we can certainly get the links out to folks to be able to see the prior sessions that we facilitated on that.
Thank you.
Have some sense of the numbers of students who are accessing it, and then coupling that with the report that we had some time ago in terms of the seniors and meeting with their counselors, and at that time there were quite a few who were not meeting with their counselors, and how that's been resolved?
Sure, we can certainly get the data from the attendance and participation, but keep in mind when they're accessing that, they don't necessarily identify themselves by school, by grade level, by district, but we're aware because we recognize a lot of the names, so we can see and track it from that perspective. And as far as the access of our students to our counselors for the one-on-one sessions, we're at, you note in one of the recent reports, we put 100%, because to put 100%, we did multiple avenues to reach out to kids, and we only have less than 1% that aren't really accessing that opportunity, but they've had Outlook invites sent to them, team invites, we've called their parents, we've tried to do every possible avenue, so we've left the door open, and less than 1% has yet to take advantage of that opportunity.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Other issues or follow-up? Is there more points? Dr. Chu, did you finish all the things you wanted to say about seniors? Was there anything else?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the equity piece of that puzzle to make sure that we're not just taking care of the one set of needs and not the other. That's all.
Thank you. Other issues?
Well, I had an observation that a lot of the title of this discussion is COVID adjusted learning updates. And there were a lot of things to do with this embedded in the report that we read on Goal 2 Learn and Thrive for our workshop. And in that report, there were a lot of different problems were mentioned. One of the overarching one, kids not using the software and misunderstandings around async time. But what I kept reading through there over and over was professional development was like something that was wanted on all these different topics, or it was just pervasive throughout that report. They had different, also was talking about different strategies like parent ed on some of this software or classified staff to help with the software. But I'm just wondering, since we have this time to discuss it, if anyone has anything to add around strategies and problems and strategies. Maybe not.
No,
He was trying to unmute right now.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Regarding the professional development, a lot of the support is really embedded support from our ITCLs. So our IT, like I see their weekly teaching and learning newsletters, and I look at their the work that they're doing every single week, and then they are such a connected group. Our ITCLs are the instructional coaches that are at every one of our schools, and we have more than one at our high schools. And these folks stay up to date on all of the technology. It's part of their title. And they push out and share amongst each other that then gets shared with the teachers. So many tools, but also so many like little videos or little click sheets on how to do this and how to do that. And then teachers will share with them, look what I did, or look what I made, and this made it so much easier. And then they push that out. That's how it gets out district-wide, is that they push that out to their other ITCL network, who then pushes it out to their schools. So a lot of the professional development, you know that we have a lot of professional development hours.
I've been to it.
In addition, a lot of it is the just-in-time support that teachers need, and that is provided a lot through our curriculum folks, particularly our ITCLs.
So do we feel like this is enough to address the issues that were raised in that document? I could go back and review it, but I just noticed that, you know, there were a lot of things, and they kept saying the strategy is professional development.
I think what you were reading and hearing is, and yet people can only take so much. We can't fire them. So you can only take so much. For example, you know, I attended the some of the workshops that we offered over this summer, right before school started, like on Lexia and Freckle and how to use some of these software pieces that we were rolling out. And there's only so much you can take, and you kind of need it in real time. You need it when you're about to use it. And so we did all of that. And then how much real time do people really have? So it's the professional development, the opportunities are there, but it's too much, you know, for folks. That's what I think what we're hearing is we can only, our bandwidth is only so large to learn and apply these things well. You know, in a perfect world, we would be able to, you know, focus on something, get really good at it, measure our implementation, now do the next thing. And a lot of times through the PLCs, that's where it's most impactful for teachers, because they can do it in real time and support each other on implementation. So I would say that I think what you were reading in there, Director Watson, was was the dilemma about folks only have so much bandwidth.
Okay.
So to follow up on that, we understand that it is difficult on everyone, and certainly educators have been asked to do a lot and shift dramatically their practices, and yet at the same time we still have students who are failing at much higher rates than usual, at least on paper or in Synergy. So it's not clear if the students actually have potentially mastered the material, but it's just not being reflected that way, or if they are. So there could be multiple reasons for that, but it seems that there are students who, whether, as in our earlier discussion, lack of engagement, maybe there's not an opportunity to demonstrate what they know. So what is our plan forward? So recognizing that people are stressed, and yet it is for the students that each day, each year for them is their year. It doesn't come back. And so, and especially for our seniors, many of them are, it's critical for them. But overall, we say, what are we going to do for students now to support them?
I'll take this one. Well, I think you heard some of the things that we're doing to support them. So what Patty shared at the high school level and the efforts that we're making in order to not only engage our students, but then to support them not only social emotionally, but also academically. Hers was more focused on academics because goal 2 is our academic goal. But there are a lot of things that our schools are doing school by school to engage and support students. And I think Dr. Chu hit the nail right on the head. Engagement. It's engagement above everything else, and the other outcomes will come if we can really engage our students in whatever way works for them. So I think, excuse me, so I think that's a big part of it. And what are we going to do for our kids right now? What we're trying to do is bring in kids for in-person, and we're having some real wins with the in-person services. So I saw an email just, I think it was yesterday, from one of our MLL facilitators to the teacher saying, wow, I can't believe how in just this short amount of time, your student in your classroom has made this level of progress. And this is so impressive. So these teachers were having conversation with each other because they were attributing it to just the simple act, and it's not really a simple act, but of bringing students in person and the impact that's having. So we're bringing back our K2. Our next plan will be to look at 3-5. Simultaneously, Patty is working with folks to look at 6 through 12. What are some ways that we can engage kids, and what would engagement look like at the high school and the middle school level? Because we don't want to end the school year without having that in place.
And then just previous to the school year, right? So that seems like there's a long enough, ramp until June. However, as we discussed, a lot of students have their self-worth, for better or worse, tied up in these marks that they're given, again, by 7 different people, 7 different expectations, 7 different subjects. And we're seeing that it is worse than ever. So I guess the ramp is very short at this point. And so some of those processes are going to take a while. If the kids are already disengaged, re-engaging them is difficult, and then becomes a prerequisite for those other improvements. So I guess we're at a critical window. And so are there immediate things that can be implemented?
Right. In terms of grading, I have a lot of hope, given what I heard from John Harrison when I met with him just yesterday and talked about what the grading team is talking about and some of the ideas that they're exploring around grading and how to better support, not only better support our students, but also do no harm at the same time, motivating kids to continue to learn and engage. So that's tricky. That is super tricky. And I don't know that there's a perfect solution for that. And quite frankly, grading has been an issue for us for a long time. This isn't a new issue. And now we have some new approaches that we really believe in, and rolling them out right now is tricky. We know that it's not going to be, that people aren't going to make these adaptive changes overnight. So we're making these technical solutions, and we're trying these approaches with grading, and we know that people aren't going to change necessarily their beliefs about grading and beliefs about assessment overnight. We're already seeing examples of that, and right now we're taking a case-by-case approach. But we really, in a more perfect situation where we did have more bandwidth and time, that would be a significant area of focus in professional development for us. So it's something that we need to weave in and integrate, because I think when you have a bandwidth issue, you got to start thinking about integration of some of these things. But in terms of grading, it's not a new struggle for us. Francine, and I don't have the solution for it. I have a lot of hope in what I'm seeing coming out of ideas from the grading committee.
Okay, Director Serafin?
Yes, I have some questions for the superintendent and staff, but before we get to that, I want to ask Dr. Weiss to maybe address the community, because we got questions last time about our cameras not being on. We are actually all on camera. We can see each other. I know that was a decision that you made based on just thinking about what would support us as a board, and I just wonder if it'd be worth just taking a minute to do that, and whether you want to do it between now and the next session, I mean our next segment, maybe between now and when we start 7.1, but I just want to make sure it's clear to those listening that we actually can all see, we're all on camera. It's about what others can see, and maybe that's something you could address after this section. So I do have a question for the superintendent. For those, I guess, watching this or listening, before our meeting, we had a study session, and Dr. Dren, in that we talked about how you are calibrating what we do, kind of just for context, and I guess what you'd call benchmarking, how our district is doing versus other schools, both public and private. We continue to hear from people say, like, how come you're not opening faster, or why are you open at all? And I think it might be helpful just to give some calibration. I've read people saying, you know, I know private schools are open. I think many of us have checked just to understand how are we doing, and most of them actually are all virtual. So the calibration would be helpful, but then within that, I know there's a lot of people in the community who have very different views on the K through 2 and bringing them back, and it would be worth perhaps addressing how that fits into the broader plan. I know that Deputy Superintendent DeVita has explained before, you know, that the entire approach was always a dial and not like a flip of a switch, like all on, all off. So I think from my vantage point, I've seen us providing services increasingly as we could and learning from it. But it would be helpful, I think, to address the core questions we've heard from the community, which include why now? What about the vaccine? What are we doing to get the vaccine for our community, particularly our educators? And how does the decision square with county health guidance? I think those things would be helpful, but I would suggest maybe calibrating it to what you know about what's happening in our, I'll just say our state, but really it's our county, would be probably helpful.
Yeah, so I can start off by just saying, yeah, I think from the calibration. So I think first and foremost, you know, we have reached out to private schools, and you're right, it really does vary. I mean, I think what we've heard is that many of them are doing what we're doing in terms of bringing, you know, smaller groups of students back and coming up with different ways to have students receiving in-person services. So that is definitely something that's out there. I don't know of a private school that is actually doing all students broadly returning. So if there's one, I don't know about them. And then I think from the calibration standpoint, you know, we had our last meeting last Wednesday with the area PSESD superintendents, and it really does vary, you know, because our region covers not only King County, but it also includes Pierce County. Down in Pierce County, they have higher numbers. What I can say here around where we are is that we do know Mercer Island had planned to do some opening earlier in this month, and they have actually pushed it off until January. Same with Issaquah. We haven't heard, you know, from Lake Washington in terms of what some of their next steps are, but I know from the calls, everybody is also working to try to bring smaller groups of students back and serving students as best as possible. So that is definitely something that's in place. For some of the larger districts with Seattle, you know, we were told that, you know, they basically would need about a 2.5 month window to do any sort of reopening. So that's a much longer time frame that's in place. So we kind of keep track of what other people are doing, but I know everybody is moving to some type of in-person services, trying to support students, you know, following some of the models that we have in place here and what we've been trying to do. I think that, you know, as we think about where we are right now, I mean, I kind of iterated in some of my opening remarks, but I think that, you know, when we look at the decision tree has always given us the ability to be able to bring small groups back. You know, they have that ability, when the cases, which was identified as 75, more what we could do in that situation. So that is one reason why we started early on in September to bring smaller groups back and to bring the groups back for athletics activities to receive conditioning. And we've just been adding on. We've been adding on more and more services so that we can, provide those in-person services. The K through 2 has always been part of there, and I think what we have really been keen and focusing on is, again, following the science and really taking a look and seeing exactly what is out there and what are we learning, So we are cohorting small groups. We've prepared the buildings to have the space to spread out for social distancing. We have, health attestation protocols in place, for anybody that, may potentially be sick. We have the multi-layer protocols that really have been in use since, I think, even all going back to September. We've been able to serve that, up to 3,000 students. And again, as though we've had some positive cases, we have not had spread within our buildings. And then I would also say, some of the newer science that we're reading is that, younger students are unlikely to drive transmission, especially in the school setting. So we continue to read information, try to find out what is going on around us and to find out what we can learn from, not only us here locally, but at national level. So we're taking that information and bringing that in for our work. As far as the vaccine, so we had a call last week, with King County Health and with the Eastside directors that's been organized by Dr. Chu and Dr. Wiest, and so we had some really good insight and conversation around some of the pieces with vaccination. So we are really going to be leaning on some of our community partners, so we know Seattle Visiting Nurse Association has been one of the groups that, has, provided, different types of vaccinations for us. And so, they are working and they are signing up so they can be a vaccine distributor and administrator. So that is definitely something that is in the works. Our Highline School Base Health Center is changing some administrative staff, but as soon as that gets settled, we do plan on having that site be one of our distribution centers. I think one of the things that is challenging when we think about the vaccinations is that it's going to be a very complex plan to get it, rolled out. We know that the different phases, phase 1A is high-risk workers, healthcare settings, and residents and in long-term facilities. And I believe, educators on the list that I saw from Washington last were part of Group 1B, but we were told, that window is probably going to be somewhere between March and May. And so there's definitely going to be some time lag in terms of when that vaccine actually gets distributed. And then the final thing I'll say is that, we are definitely looking into the possibility being, a distribution site, but there are so many just protocols that have to be in place, from the refrigeration to the administration of the timing for when the vaccine was received, and then the refrigerators have to have an alarm on them in order to determine if there's going to be any drop in temps or anything like that. And we don't necessarily have all of those, so that's why we're going to continually rely on some of our outside agencies to support us in that. And I think, again, that goes back to one of the areas that we have to keep working to get more community support in that area, because I think we have hospital systems around us, we have the Seattle Visiting Nurse, even local pharmacies, could they help us in this process? So we're going to definitely be leaning in to try to get that support in place. And that's that for our team. If there's anything else that you guys would want to add, Dr. Thomas.
I think the one thing that I will add is we have consistently tried to bring in groups of students and staff before to help model for others. And what we have seen is the modeling has made a significant difference. And with all of our administrators and buildings having classified support, it's begun to create the movement towards more of an anchoring of the adults in the building. And the other thing that we're seeing is adults are missing one another. The mental health concerns are equal to our staff. In fact, we did a visit this afternoon over at Interlake with our transition staff, and just the ability for them to talk with other adults and not have to do that via a screen, and all of us, making sure that we have our mask and physical distancing, is really one of the things that I think we're underestimating the importance of and the power with our.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to
I do want to just add one more really quick piece is that, I did, I visited one of our elementary schools last Friday, and it was just a really powerful experience to see, one site that is serving, students with a child care through our Boost program, and to see students participating in different classes and to see them getting some, one-on-one support, so it was really, powerful to see that. And, even before I got into the building, I had to go through the whole attestation process, temperature check, and all those protocols, and so even me as a superintendent doesn't get to just bypass the system. I have to go through everything, and I really appreciate, that for the safety that our staff is really, putting in place for the risk mitigation processes. It was great also to see, some of our ECAP students who are receiving, instruction now, and just to see the level of education they're receiving. I did get there towards the end of the day, but it was still just a powerful example of to see our students together, to see our educators doing the best job, in that in-person services. And then finally, I know we have talked a lot about our FCCs and the work that they're doing, our family community specialists, and just seeing how much, how many groceries, how many hygiene products, how many laundry supplies are there that they were preparing to distribute was really amazing. And knowing that, this group has been serving our students and families, from the beginning of this pandemic, we've added additional supports for them so they have more, support in that area. But it was just a powerful way to go and just again see where we have been successful in providing in-person services while we have been very cautious and careful to ensure that the risk mitigations are in place.
Okay, so Dr. Malif has some follow-up, and we are at time. We did start a few minutes late, so I'd like to take it since we spent quite a bit of time on secondary earlier, and I believe she has some comments about K through 2.
Yeah, thank you. Erica Malif, for anyone listening, can't see me. So I have some questions about the return to school for K through 2. The district sent an email to families announcing this, as evidenced by the 135 emails we got or something like that in the past 24 hours. Obviously that's caused quite a stir. Some people are very happy about it, some people not. But as a parent of one of these K through 2 students, as you all know, I have a kindergartner and a first grader, I have questions, and I'm sitting in a privileged position on the school board and know a lot more than a lot of other people. So for one, families were not told the dates of the return to school. We were, and teachers were. And so I would like to understand if there's a reason for that, if there's like some squishiness there, that's clarified, because obviously people need to plan. 2, parents were not told anything other than that this would be happening in the end of January and that there would be a survey coming. So I want to make sure a couple of things, because this is a really critical piece of communication for our families, is one, that the survey contains information that has enough information for families to make a decision. The hybrid for K2, the hybrid model was not the original plan. It was K2 were going to be full day, 5 days a week, and now it's going to be A/B, morning, afternoon. That's a change. And so, I would like to make sure that families are going to know what their kids' schedules are. Whether, I already know that you guys are planning to make sure that siblings are on the same schedule or whatever contingencies there, but what the actual schedules are, what the, transportation system is, what the classroom system is going to look like. I know you all have done so much work around this, but I want to make sure that families have enough information to feel confident in answering the survey. Like, yes, we will send my kid back to school, or no, we're not going to, but with some information about it. Yeah, so I just want to clarify that this forthcoming piece of communication is really going to have enough information for everyone to feel confident about it.
Ivan, would you like me to take that?
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. So the forthcoming piece of communication is going out tonight. It's got a significant number of data in it. It does have behind why we made the decision around the COVID-19 data. It has risk mitigation and safety protocols listed in it, along with a link to more detail of that information on our website. It also has the schedule, including very specific in terms of the hours of operation for every school. So when the morning session is and when the afternoon session is and how long. It has information regarding switching educational models and what that would be like for them. And when they click into the survey, depending upon their current status, it will either take you and tell you, you are currently virtual. Do you want to attend in person? Do you want to remain virtual? So it will take you, or if you're hybrid, you are currently have selected hybrid, blah, blah, blah. So it separates as soon as you enter in your student's name and number so that you will know what your current status is, because I'm sure a lot of people have forgotten what they initially selected. It includes information regarding transportation as well as the safety practices we will have on the buses. You know, the loading and offloading procedures and protocols, disinfecting between routes, hand sanitizer as kids load, that type of thing. It's got information on childcare and where to go to get more information about childcare. And it also highlights for people that, you know, in all likelihood, King County rates will remain relatively high. And we want people to know that our plan is to go forward. They will not be below that 75 mark by the time we get to end of January in all practicality. And so that is included in there as well. So we want to make sure people are aware of that as they're making their decision. So there's a lot of data in there and a lot of link throughs to websites for people to go and look deeper. And then the letter itself has a link to the survey for them to go in and go to the survey.
Okay, are there any other follow-ups to that?
Dates are also included in that piece, Director.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think the changes are different than what people signed up for, especially with the AB, which I have expressed some concerns about. However, overall, moving in a direction really to support students and provide the services. Dr. Chu?
All right. I really want to say thank you to the staff for and appreciate the work you're putting into making this return possible in a way that really mitigates risk and respects our commitment to serve people safely and take their mental and physical health into account. I think it's a big deal, and I think it really matters that we are tending to the whole piece. So thank you for that. I just want to go back really quick to some things that Eva had mentioned, that Deputy Superintendent Collins had mentioned about the work on engagement. In our last session, we talked about our secondary kids and their well-being, well, really all our kids and their well-being and how important engagement was. But there are a few things that happen in the reports, which I think we'll be talking about approving next, and they're about back to school. So I just want to note that if we're really going to attack engagement and do it in a way that prioritizes student motivation and a growth mindset, I worry a little bit about a couple of the things that I saw in the reports, and you guys might already be acting on these. So I want to raise them just so that you can maybe share a little bit. So one thing that I noticed that I worry about the growth mindset piece getting stomped out a bit is we did some very heavy, very heavy testing at the beginning of the year that was more comprehensive instead of just in time to assess where kids were at. And then we sorted them, at least according to the reports, into like these different groups, which sounds to me ability level groupings or something of that harkens back to the day. And we know from research that that's very demotivating and that actually exacerbates gaps. So I'm wondering, like, how are we making sure that those, like, what are supposed to be fluid groupings depending on the lesson and the time and everything are not becoming permanent identity markers for kids? The second thing that I wanted to ask about in that space, I guess the testing frequency, the grouping, is how can we ensure that the grading is getting a lens on it that has to do not only with equity related to past issues, but really that it has a lens on it that's about motivating kids in this environment during this time for all kids and the impacts it's having on them. Because right now we know that the grades don't look like they have before. And I wanted to make sure that the lens that we have on that is actually not just taking care of those D's and F's, but is looking at each and every kid. We already raised in the last session, like there's at least 6 or 8 categories or groups of students who are impacted by the way that grading is working out. And yeah, I guess, I mean, those are kind of the 2 big ones that I saw in the reports. There might be a few other items, but how do we make sure that, like, is there something we can do to shift our approach in all spaces to prioritize motivation, growth mindset, and helping kids to engage in meaningful ways and to feel like it's worth it to do so?
Dr. Duran?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot in there, but I think from the very beginning, I think just that, with the overall assessments, the assessments are designed so we can figure out where students are and try to provide individual support so students aren't put into specific groups and are not locked in them. It really does give the teacher, educators, their ability to be able to sort students and be able to give them different types of supports based on where they are and how they're doing. And again, with the power of some of these assessments, that it helps to fill or identify what the gaps are so that we can have better understanding around what the next steps that students need to do to be successful. So I think that's one of the key things that those assessments allow us to be able to do. I do think we still need to do a lot more work to really help people understand all the different uses of them and how we can better understand meeting some of the standards, and to the earlier conversation around even determining what is like the essential part of the standard that needs to be understood and learned at that period. So I think that's definitely one part of it. I know Deputy Collins, we want to add more around some of the things that we're doing to address the areas with our students from the reports.
Before you jump in, I do want to make one other clarification about the sorting and stuff. One of the other things that I saw in the reports was in one particular area, if you added up the totals, it was something like 79% of students were receiving tier 2 and tier 3 interventions, which really spoke volumes to whether or not our tier 1 approach to instruction is engaging, is motivating, is inclusive. So as you talk to that, I'd also just like to hear, because I know you're making adjustments, and those are some of the major things that stood out in these reports that tie back to this concept of successful engagement today. And there are places where I think we have opportunities to make an actual difference in the short term.
Yeah, I just want to echo that as well. So on the one hand, having these additional tiers of support for students is admirable, right? So to meet kids where their needs are. On the other, it is concerning that very few end up being in tier 1, where I believe the majority of the instruction and time is. So when we hear that there's this stress on educators, we see that in the numbers, that how much is not happening in tier 1. So comments to that would be useful.
Do you want me to jump in, Dr. Duran?
That'd be great. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So a couple things. One, the adaptive software that Dr. Seaworth described was intended to be a tier 2 intervention. And in many ways, that takes away the issue of tracking and, these groups that become stagnant and any bias or mindset or belief on the part of, let's say, the teacher, because the student is working at their own pace in an adaptive software. So there is no interaction in that way. However, okay, so that is the beauty of an adaptive software. However, there's a couple of things. In the adaptive software, there is the way for the kid to go on their own path. Like I take the screener and then I go on my own path and I'm going like this. But the recommended way that we've been working with our teachers on is for them to actually select the standards that they'll be working on in that unit. Let's say it's a math unit. We're working on these standards. This is the area then that you're going to go in this pre-selected pathway. So you're going to get the background information that you're lacking, let's say, in order to be proficient in grade and access grade level material that's on grade level standards. And the beauty of that is the student can do that on their own time. They're not in some group, you know, in that way. Having said that, another bright spot of remote learning has been the ability for our teachers to have small group. And this is one of the things that we're most concerned about, that we're losing as a part of this K-2 in-person plan, which is that right now our teachers have opportunity in the afternoon, our elementary teachers, but also our secondary teachers have that opportunity in the afternoons to do small group. And it is one of the places where when our teachers are doing the small groups and that are scheduled with kids, that we are getting positive feedback, and our teachers are saying it's a really powerful opportunity for them that they've not been able to do logistically in when we have class in person. So I will say the remote has actually lent itself better for differentiation and small group support that isn't like the Bluebirds and the Blue Jays or whatever, those kinds of groups that are tracked. In terms of the result and the issue with Tier 1, that was true before COVID. That was true before COVID. We've always been working on Tier 1. Remember when I talked to you about the, maybe I haven't talked to you yet about the strategic plan refresh and our continuous improvement. The continuous improvement is we're always going to be working on this Tier 1 and getting better at Tier 1. And we'll know we're better at it when we get to 85% of our kids can be proficient without any additional supports. So we'll know that we're really strong in our Tier 1 when we get to that level. We're not there yet. So we are continuing to work on Tier 1 in all of our schools. And all of our schools are in different places in terms of their Tier 1 and what's working for students. And the data can be deceiving, because in some schools, it looks like 95% of the kids are proficient at grade level, and it's true, they are. It doesn't necessarily mean that the Tier 1 instruction is meeting the needs of the kids in front of them, right? Because the kids then need something even more. I'm not sure if that answered it. I'm not sure if I answered that very well. Oh, I wanted to also say that one of our really big pushes this year that we've started and into the future, it's going to be one of our priority practices, is tutoring. Tutoring is a very effective research-based approach to supporting kids, regardless of where they are in terms of their learning. Like, we know kids who are in AP classes who get a tutor to help support them through a unit or through a course. And it can be extremely powerful, and not all of our kids have access to tutors. So we are working on that, and we have a number of things. We are doing a pilot at the middle school level. We have high school kids who are doing tutoring at the elementary level. It's really cool. So we will share more with you once we have some data to share.
Okay, are there any other comments? We're over time on this area, but clearly it's the important work that is happening. All right, seeing none, we're going to move on to agenda item 7. I will point out, I was going to do this later in my update part, but I will point out for those listening that we are following requirements for the Open Public Meetings Act that require us to have virtual meetings. We cannot be in person. We also are trying, within the limits of our technology, different ways to enhance the ability of our board to function as a high-functioning, high-performing board. And that includes being able to see one another and not be just seeing the slide or the item that is being discussed. And so to that end, we are on camera with one another so that we can see and have a robust discussion. We have also addressed a number of equity issues that have come our way in terms of some things, perhaps even when we go back to in-person, that we will continue because we are able to offer more access to the public and to the community in terms of providing public comment. And additionally, with the format in our live streaming for Teams, there are some limitations, but there are some benefits. So everyone, I want to point out that you can have your closed captioning turned on as it's streaming in the bottom right corner, there's a little CC in a box. You click on it and there's live stream captions. So that should help with those who have difficulty just with the audio portion. If you would like to have another language streamed prior to the meeting, you can request that, and we can have other languages in as well. So we are grateful that the technology allows us to actually increase access to many people who want to listen to the meetings. So next up, we're going to do the consent agenda.
This is Jennifer Bateman, the coordinator to the board. I just wanted to mention that I know there are some people who have difficulty tracking voices, and I didn't hear you say that just then, President Dr. Wiest, but I did want to mention that if we can remember to introduce our names before we speak, it takes a little bit longer, but that way anybody who has trouble tracking voices, is that a possibility, Dr. Wiest?
We will in the course call on folks, but this is a board meeting. It's for the business of the board to interact with one another and conduct the business of the board for the school district. The public is invited to listen, and we try to make it, as we said, accessible, and we are glad that there are certain aspects that are increasing access to the community, and we will continue to work and iterate so that we have a process that works well for the board and for our district in serving our students and our families and our educators to have the best possible school district and system that we can. So the next item on the agenda is number 7, the consent agenda for the reports. So this is our second consent agenda. Are there any reports that anyone wants to pull, or can we maintain the consent agenda as is? Dr. Ju.
I don't want to pull anything. I just want to appreciate that the staff is going to a bit of trouble to be transparent and to put out there what's not working. And I really appreciated that and the frankness of it. I think that goal area 2 is a space that we have a lot of work to do in, and I really appreciate the transparency. The other thing I want to call out is something that we could talk about in detail later if we want to, but I think that we do want to reduce the burden on staff with these reports overall. And so Goalcom is signing up to, and in light of 0300 falling under their purview and so forth, to do some work that might help support making this a lighter weight endeavor while still keeping the integrity of the information and the exercise of actually worrying about where we're going and how well we're doing getting there, and being able to adjust accordingly. So thank you for the work. Thank you for the transparency, and we look forward to lightening the load with you on this.
So is that a motion to approve?
Well, I was just going to make another comment. If
Go ahead.
Time. Which is just that, yeah, I think these reports are all very interesting, and we went through some of it when we were doing the workshop on Learn and Thrive and the creators of their future world. Went through in some detail. Exceptional staff in nursing we didn't get to talk about as much, so I just wanted to point out that I think they look good, but there's sure some things I would have loved to talk about in there, so hopefully we'll circle back at some point.
Okay, any other comments? All right, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda B?
So moved.
All right, I'll second it. Is there any further discussion? Any opposition? Any opposition? Consent agenda B is approved. Thank you. All right, moving on to item 8.1, policy suspensions. You have a list before you. I'm just going to note quickly that there are a couple that we are recommending reinstatement. There is a suspension of community service hours as part of graduation requirements is recommended. Continued suspension of school visitors, and then suspension specifically of the sick leave and attendance program that provides potential adverse impacts on employees and students by incentivizing attendance. Are there any questions? All right, is there a motion to approve this policy suspension list?
I'll move
So
to.
move. Oh, sorry, second then.
Okay, any further discussion? All right, any opposition to approving these recommendations? Any opposition? Seeing none, the recommendations are approved. All right, moving on to item 8.2, the goal committee.
All right, we have 2 updates for you. Since I think I was the last one working on this part, Seema, do you want me to do the part on the, okay. So the 2 parts that we have are, we'll start with this one that's right in here. In that, sorry, I'm trying to pull it up. We're basically working, and we have been advocating, as folks mentioned, for almost a year now, to get state level support for schools in this reopening work. There are a lot of agencies involved. It runs the gamut from executive branch agencies to legislative agencies, state level, federal level, county level, you name it. And we, like Francine, Director Wiest and I are on a call every Friday that approximately monthly, we have King County legislators in there. We have King County Executive Office often represented, and we have the King County Health Department represented. So we're doing that work. Director Serafin and I, along with staff, are meeting regularly with our legislators. We're also independently, each of us is doing something to work on. I know Director Wiest works on communication stuff. Director Serafin has reached out to our legislators on numerous issues. So there's a lot of advocacy going on. What we need is right now a piece that's not in our legislative agenda, because it's really about all the different branches of government needing to work together to say that schools are a priority. Because if we don't, then we're not going to be able to manage community conditions. We're not going to be able to have the resources. We're not going to be able to do what we need to get the schools open safely for everybody. So this is kind of an ask, and we'd like the board to approve this ask. It puts in one place the things that we need coordination on, and I'll just show you really quick what they are. I don't know if Mike or Jen or someone is able to bring up this document that's called Prioritize School Openings. It's not really a letter. We'll include it in a letter to various parties like the governor's office and OSPI. But the factors in it, if you haven't had a chance to review it, are we need everyone to actually prioritize school reopening. Like when they're deciding what order to open things in, they can't think of schools after they've already made all their decisions. We need people to think about it from the start. We need to coordinate guidelines from all the agencies. Dr. Duran went through the laundry list earlier, so I won't do that again. We need to factor schools into the vaccine distribution plans. Dr. Duran told us, King County told us Friday that their likely case scenario is really not seeing our teachers getting vaccines until April, May, but where we want it beyond, are they going to get vaccines? Where are they in the list? We want to know that there's a comprehensive plan for distributing them that doesn't have one district fighting another to get at the head of the line, that there's enough vaccines for all the educators who need them, that they are prioritized, that they have access, etc. And that on the longer term look, that the 16 to 18-year-olds who sooner, and then the K-12 students, they need to have access when it is approved and safe for them. So that's on our list. Supporting a scalable testing and screening, we still need to be able to test quickly if we have a particular potential exposure, because we need it so that we can isolate appropriately, and we don't want to be closing and reclosing. If there is funding available to do surveillance level screening, there are several districts in Pierce County and a few other counties that have piloted that work. We want to make sure that that's equitably available to all districts so that we can check how is everyone doing. Do we need to dig in? In the work that was done in one county, there were like hundreds and hundreds, maybe even thousands of tests done, and one case was discovered. So it wasn't an essential component of managing risk, but it was a really good reality check for folks to have access to that data, that the risk mitigations were in fact doing their job. So that's an important piece. We also need keep all the decisions that are being made rooted in sound science and the latest risk mitigation. We need them to actively communicate, and they need to communicate about all the data. Like, people need to know what is the actual data in schools about transmissions, what are conditions, what's going on, what are the risk mitigation successes, how are they working? We need that at all levels. We can't do that on our own. And then we need support for emergency funding, both CARES Act at the federal level and state interim funding to get us through into that space. So this is kind of a comprehensive ask, and we'd like the board to approve this so we can send this out as part of our advocacy at all these different levels. Seema, is there anything you would add to that?
So to clarify,
I'm shaking my head no, but this is Seema Serafin. No, there's nothing I would add to that. I think just highest level is just that, as you said at the beginning, we continue to advocate across multiple levels to get, frankly, better direction, guidance, and coordination at all levels, including the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction and our legislators.
Right. So to clarify, this would be signed by us. Yes. And would it? Okay. So we don't have particular letterhead. So is it an invitation? And perhaps Dr. Duran needs to chime in. Is it an invitation from the Bellevue School District, or is it an invitation from the Bellevue School District Board? That's my one.
Sorry. Good catch.
Okay. And then potentially at the bottom, putting Bellevue School District again, board directors at the bottom, just to emphasize that it was us. I wasn't sure if you'd written this letter to also share with other districts, so they could basically sign on.
We will share this with them, but right now this isn't intended to be a collaborative paper. We will share this with all of the districts we collaborate with as soon as we finish, but we want to get our approval first.
Right, and then my other.
We were doing this in partnership with the district because originally, as discussed, I thought would be Dr. Duran in the context in which we were speaking before, who was going to be writing back the legislators with whom we had this discussion about how we wanted to have tighter alignment, frankly, with the Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. So I actually had thought that this was going to be coming from the initial letter. I thought was going to be coming from the superintendent, and I thought that was the better approach. I knew about the content, but I see it's framed as being signed by the board, and I don't know if that was a shift or a request by the superintendent.
No, the letter is supposed to come from the superintendent. This is supposed to be a standalone doc that we can hand out in multiple, because this requires coordinated support. And the superintendent is going to write the letter to OSPI and the governor and that group, that first group. But this is something that will go with the letter, and then they will either pull text from it or they will attach it, depending on what works best for getting the message across.
So kind of belt and suspenders.
Yeah. So then we can just decide if we want this. Dr. Duran, I assume this continues to represent your position as well. And you're signing it. I think it's got you down here. Do you want us to say from the school district or the school district and board of directors, or what would be the most effective title for this?
I think we've done joint communication. We've done it in partnership with both the board and the superintendent.
Okay, so how about an invitation from the Bellevue School District Board of Directors and Superintendent? Would that work as a fix for that, Francine?
I just wanted to clarify. I just wanted to make sure it was clear. So that's fine. Yep. If that's what everyone wants. And then the other would be to just perhaps call out a little bit clearer that this is K-12. So only K-12 is only listed once under the third bullet, kind of buried at the end, but prioritize K through 12 school reopening, factor K through 12 schools into the comprehensive vaccine distribution plans. I mean, clearly it's coming from us, so this is the schools we're talking about, but if these get lifted out of context, then that becomes, you know, broader. It could be post-secondary.
Could we make that as an administrative change to this, since it's not a change to the integrity of the doc? Great. So I'm going to motion that we approve this as per the modification proposed.
Is there more time for more discussion?
Yeah. Well, we take a motion. We can. Dr. Serafin seconds, yes, and then. This is from both of you, and then further discussion. My only other comment, and then Director Watson, you can go, was, and I think it was clarified, was that the fourth bullet where it talks about the surveillance, the screening testing. You did mention that right now has not been shown to be kind of a necessary layer on the risk mitigation strategies. It is quite expensive. And I do just want to point out that in terms of, it sounds like you're saying right at the beginning of reopening to inspire confidence. I'm just really concerned with the limited dollars that are out there, where they would be spent in terms of being able to really support the broadest number of students, educators, rather than a smaller number that were tested frequently.
I think we put the words "if possible" in that space because it's the only place where we have "if possible" in this document. So okay. I think we've prioritized it appropriately.
Okay, I just wanted to call that out. Director Watson.
Okay, yeah, that was one thing. I actually didn't want the words "if possible." I'm more of a believer in surveillance testing. I know you just said that it happened someplace nearby and they didn't catch much, but I'm not sure that that's going to be the same case going forward. And I also think the price is coming down, and there are a number of advocates and articles that I could find supporting that position. So I kind of, you know, I think it's kind of pie in the sky that we won't have the money and we won't get it, but I don't want to, since this is a thing asking for stuff, I don't want to say "if possible." I want to say, you know, you can change the words "support surveillance testing in schools to minimize spread," or, you know, something in there that makes it a little bit like, you don't have to do it if it's going to be not worth it, but I want them to support the idea and keep looking into it, because I think there's a way to make it work and to make it less, I'm thinking a lot about the work of Michael Minna out of Harvard University. He's written a lot on this and in the national press, and you know, he's saying that they can drive the price down to just a couple of dollars a test if we go for the less accurate tests. He's got a whole kinds of charts and graphs showing how that'll show if you're actually contagious that day. So I think we need more looking into that. Also, the vaccine prioritization, I wonder whether we want to get into talking at all about it, because following healthcare workers and high-risk individuals. So as a high-risk individual, I've been following this carefully, and I think they're talking about healthcare workers and the kind of high-risk people who live in nursing homes, where they're kind of like sitting ducks for this disease, but possibly then teachers, and then come to high-risk people like me who can stay home for a while. I'd rather have the teacher get my thing. So I wonder if there's a way to word this so that's not quite so whatever. But then the real problem I have is the first thing, prioritize school reopening, is written in such a way that it makes it sound like let's open irregardless or regardless of anything. And I want some notion of, you know, let's put it front and center in our conversations, but let's remember that it needs to be safe. And I just, or as we would say, safer, because nothing's ever safe, but at 400 and something per 100,000, when the original number was 10 per 100,000, and then it went to like 20, and then in our state it went to 75.
So Carolyn, there's a sentence above that. I don't know if we need to put, if you want to put something in the prioritized school reopening, I can look for something, but it says we must continue to work together so the following are in place to manage and mitigate risks so we can bring our students back to buildings in equitable ways that honor and respect the health and well-being of our students, staff, and community. So that is definitely embedded in this document. If you want to add a small phrase, we tried to get these bullets down to a smaller thing, and I see your point. So if you have a small phrase you think you can add, let me know what it is. Otherwise, I'll try to brainstorm while you finish other comments.
Well, those are the three that I had.
So
something around the possible, making sure some regard to safety in that first bullet. You know, I'm not as worried about, but maybe something about the vaccine. Ensuring educators are eligible for vaccine distribution, I don't know, as soon as possible, or something, without dictating the order, because I think that's in flux. And I just want more support for surveillance testing.
So I would be okay with taking it as is, and Director Watson, I just want to point out that that we do have conversations with King County Public Health and some of our local groups here who are involved in a lot of the information that comes out about COVID and risk and spread. And so kind of the earlier comments are in line with that, and do take into account it is the tests that are only a couple of dollars, and yet that adds up when you're talking about thousands of students.
Of course, that's why you need federal or state support with that.
Yeah, and they're doing it on a weekly basis, and so with that in mind, they have not found it. It is as you pointed out, things continue to evolve and change. So if we were to go ahead, I would do it as written. Are there any further comments?
I would actually suggest that I'm going to motion that we approve this as presented with the modified title, and that we further approve that the that when sharing these sentiments, that the advocacy committee has, or that the folks applying this have the power to go ahead and adjust wording as appropriate, as long as the integrity of this message stays intact. So if we are able to, like, you know, make that clarification about we want healthy reopening or what have you, that we can do that at the time.
I'm fine with that, and just emphasize K-12 in the document, so if things are lifted out, it is clear.
Okay.
Anyone else? Or I'll second it then. Anyone else? All right.
I feel like I won't sign it this week.
Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm not really understanding is sorry, the modification, Christine, you just made, Dr. Chu, you just made, because are you saying let's approve it, but we can tweak some language later? Because I think the if possible question's a fair one. I know you did a lot of iteration. I had not necessarily caught that, and I guess I'm not really sure.
So we can't change, like, if we're going to sign the document's signed. I was saying, like, we're going to pull language from this and use it. So I was just saying, so, but we can get rid of that wishy-washy piece of the motion. I'm happy to make a couple of these quick changes to the document right now so that we can all sign this. I don't think it's a big deal to make a couple quick changes to address the points that Carolyn brought up. I don't think it's going to amount to a row of pins difference if we use the words if possible or not. Like, we're asking for support for screening if that becomes an appropriate tool. If we say prioritize school reopening, we can change that right away to prioritize healthy school reopening, or we can say something like prioritize school reopening with appropriate risk mitigations in all communications. It doesn't hurt us to modify these things and make them clear.
I think let's do that. I would propose that.
So let's do that. So what do you think? Prioritize school reopening with appropriate risk mitigations in all communications, blah, 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 blah. Would that be sufficient, Carolyn?
No,
right,
because that makes it sound like.
So I'm going to interrupt for a moment because we still have quite a number of things to accomplish, and we are over time. So we need a motion to extend time. We are at the end of our time. We still have a short executive session that is proposed after this. So I'll entertain a motion to extend time.
I motion that we extend time, but on this, that we keep it very short. On this particular part, like, we shouldn't do more than another 5 minutes on this.
Okay, so one possibility, although I think you're presenting the next part, is can you make those changes in your document and then pull them up? So perhaps we can go to, you're on all of these committees coming up. All right, perhaps we can go to 8.5.
Well, I don't think I can do it in a vacuum. I think I need Carolyn. So if we could just really quickly just get that. Carolyn, you said you didn't like the proposal for prioritize school reopening with appropriate risk mitigations. Do you have a quick phrase you might suggest?
Because that just sounds like put on a mask. it was better with prioritize healthy school reopening, or
Great.
I want it to be in the context of community spread.
Let's put healthy school reopening in there then, because that takes multiple pieces into account. So that I am fine with that. So prioritize healthy school reopening. Let's go remove the words if possible.
Yeah.
Under the fourth bullet. Okay.
Right.
So
they try
a strike through them. And then what was the third one was on the vaccines.
Yeah,
so if I go to the third bullet.
I list out who might get it in what order. It's just that we want teachers to be very high on the list.
By ensuring that educators returning to buildings are eligible, are acknowledged as essential workers and are eligible for vaccine distribution as soon as possible.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, let me just write that down. So are acknowledged as essential workers, and are eligible for vaccine distribution ASAP, or we'll spell it out, as soon as possible, period. And the rest of that sentence saying immediately following up to high-risk individuals would be deleted. Does that work?
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So that will take care of all three of the issues you asked for. We'll fix the title and we'll add some K-12s in here to make it clear. Does that make people feel more comfortable and excited about it?
Well, there's nothing comfortable about it because we have these two very difficult things going on. One, the kids are really, suffering for not being in school, and two, I don't want to kill people with COVID.
But I think what Dr. Chu is saying is we're trying to advocate to get more from the state. Do we agree as a board that this is a document that helps us advance that cause?
Okay.
I think we've been on the, I would say, pointy end of the spear in terms of being, I would say, proactive with trying to engage at all levels. And so this document is intended to make us do that more effectively and frankly ensure that not only Dr. Chu and me, or even Dr. Wiest and me, the three of us end up in different ways communicating, but I think something that all of us have thought before, that we each end up with opportunities to engage on behalf of the school district and advocate, and we should be aligned on what things we are prioritizing. So this is not it's not a good news letter, but it's intended to move the dial and change where we are in positive ways for our district. So the question is, do you think this helps us? Okay,
well, phrased that way as moving the dial, okay, that makes me more comfortable.
Okay, fair. I mean, I think none of us would say this is the kind of letter we want to be writing in terms of a great moment. It's but we want to be in a better place, and I think it's a fair point to say we could and should have had, I would say, maybe more direction from the very top, and that's what we're seeking. And we want to be very clear about what we want, rather than just look like we complain but aren't clear. So we're trying to do our part to help drive the alignment.
Okay.
Thanks, Carolyn, for pushing those issues. I think that you're dead on that this has to be done safely. Like, we have to be responsible. We have to be safe about it. Only way that's going to happen is with greater support across the state. So thank you for pushing that.
Okay, is there any further discussion?
So the motion is to approve as amended, and we've already gone through the amendments.
Right, so we'll vote on the amended version. My discussion is that I'm not entirely in agreement with that, but in terms of the fifth bullet where it says we'll continue to update recommendations regarding opening and risk mitigation based on the latest scientific and health-based information and practices, I think that bullet then covers, because I'm not sure that some of the changes really necessarily align with recommended practices. But with that, as long as we're continuing to update them, then we should be fine. So any further discussion on the amendment? All right. Any opposed to the amendment? Any opposed to the amendment? All right, seeing none, the amendment's passed. Now we vote on the whole thing. Any opposed to the entire letter or statement. Any opposed? All right, we will be signing this. We'll be seeing that in your inboxes shortly. Thank you for all the work done on it. It's overall very clear, and I think it will help drive the direction. It's certainly a lot of these pieces we've been working on piecemeal for months. We were able to make some progress on some of the issues, but we saw time and again that without the prodding, schools were really thought of way too late. In the early summer, we were seeing that many entities were not even thinking about schools until the fall, because they said schools start in the fall, without taking into account the amount of time it takes to get schools actually open. And so the continued advocacy is very important. All right, item 8.3, Cs.
Okay, so Cs committee, Carolyn and I met with the rest of the committee, and we've got some updates. So I want to just walk you through really quick for 0130P.
Oh, good. I thought the grid wasn't there earlier when I was reading things. It's there now. Great. Okay, I'm happy.
Yeah, I think we'll have Carolyn will walk you through one of these docs and I'll walk you through the other, but we'll do it very quickly. So 0130P is the procedure that goes with our equity and accountability policy. So what we are going to do right now is, this is a first reading, but I think you should think of it as a pre-reading, because we're going to bring this back to you the first week of January for a real first reading. We just want to make sure that you know what to look for.
Okay, so Dr. Chu and Dr. Watson, is there enough there that it's we can just read it as a pre-reading rather than walking through it, because we are way over time?
Give me like a minute on mine and give Carolyn a minute, because I think this is complicated and I want you to know what you're seeing, and then we'll be quick. So 0130P is the procedure that goes with our equity and accountability policy. For the Cs committee, we are updating 3 parts of this, only 3 parts. The goal committee will later in the year update the rest of it. So we are going to update the targets for our board commitments for this year in equity, and we're going to update the targets for the district's commitments in equity. Most of these are tied to and based on the annual plan and other targets that we've already set, but we're just tying that in here and finding anything that fell through the cracks and making sure that we have a commitment to advance it. And then the third section is that we're updating the critical criteria section with a new table for everyone to use that we think, wow, we worked through this with a lot of different people. We think it's going to make a powerful difference in integrating the idea of not just asking who's at risk, but in ensuring that we engage stakeholders in the critical criteria evaluation in our equity, bring their voices to the table better, and that we also are more reliable about monitoring for the risks that we say are present. Like, did they actually happen? Did we actually mitigate that? So those are the 2 things that come in that table. Carolyn, is there anything else you want to say about the new table? So the procedure exhibit A is the new critical criteria table.
Okay, yeah. So about the table. So you'll see it's very succinct now. And I just want to say I'm very encouraged by it. I think the goal was to get something that was usable and that people will use and they won't get so overwhelmed by. Because if you filled out our former critical criteria charts, you'll know that it's something you could easily not want to do. So here it should be easier. We may give out like a sample to show how you could maybe do it with sentence fragments and so forth, so it doesn't have to be so involved. And my vision is that we could paste this on the bottom of like everything. So like a report that comes, or a cover member to a policy, or any piece of work that we're doing, we'll always be reminded to think about, who is this going to benefit and harm? Who have we engaged about it? How we're going to mitigate it, any risks, and how would we know that we've addressed things? And what are we getting out of the process that we can actually try to remove barriers?
Excellent. Are there any questions for the Cs committee? All right, thank you. So seeing none, we'll move on. We'll look forward to seeing that as a first reading at a future meeting. And then next is SIFE committee on the community forum.
I think Eric is going to give the summary on this one.
Sure, no problem. So the only thing we have is the basically summary of the community forum. you all know we had a community forum on the 3rd, and Christine and I basically, Director Chu and I basically went through the notes that we received from everybody and tried to sort of collate them into general themes. And so the bullets that you see highlighted here are things that came up frequently, and in some over at least a couple of different rooms. It's split into elementary and secondary, but there are some overall themes that's summarized at the bottom of the second page, which basically comes down to learning is a struggle for everyone. Teachers are working really hard, and good communication is really key, both from the district, the teachers, the principals, everyone. I would like to ask all of you, is there anything that came up in your rooms that you do not see reflected here that you want to call out? Because I was just going based on notes, and so it's possible that things were missed. And Dr. Chu, you look like you want to say something. No, okay.
It was, we appreciate the community forum. Like, I think my favorite part of it was bringing the teachers and principals and families and board directors and all these different people playing different roles together and having them have this conversation about engagement. I found it really meaningful, and I found that they all brought a different piece of the puzzle to the picture, and I thought it was really a great endeavor, and I appreciated people's contributions.
You know, there is something missing.
Mm-hmm.
There were I don't know why it wasn't recorded, but there were a number of teachers in my breakout session that were talking about how concerned they were about school reopening, and then there were a number of families who are saying how concerned they were about the lack of school reopening, but that's not really captured here.
At the bottom, so we tried to keep the summaries in the middle there about engagement, since the theme of the community forum was engagement.
Oh, at the bottom here.
The document is
okay, you got it. All right, there it is.
Other topics that were brought up, which does include return to buildings. So, you know, at the bottom, since this was supposed to be a forum with the focus on family engagement, we tried to keep the bulk of the document about the engagement issues. And from the notes, people did a really good job of focusing their rooms. But of course, because it's a community forum with the board, there are other topics, and we just wanted to acknowledge what those were, but not focus on them. So,
I would say in our room we did try to have a discussion on what family engagement is, what it means to people, what it means to be supported and empowered, and so I don't really see those kind of definitions reflected, like really what it means to folks as much. Perhaps it's captured there. I guess I don't see it as explicitly, and I feel like that was an important part of really listening to families, what it means to them, and so how we could support them to achieve what their vision of effective family engagement is.
Okay.
So I'll go through and send, because people even put it in the chat as their own definitions.
Okay, thank you. If you could send me an email with what you feel was the most sentient point, I can amend this document and we'll just sort of update it in board docs.
Okay, that'd be great. Thanks. Dr. Serafin, did you have another point?
Well, you asked if there was anything missing, so I'm addressing that. So yeah, on secondary, under secondary on grading, what you have under 1A is correct, but I think we had more than that. It wasn't just parents not understanding the shift. It was, I would say, two other things. First, parents saying that they felt that by going to standards-based grading, students were unmotivated. So there were kind of 2 points of view articulated, one by several parents who said, essentially, if you say a student has not, basically they translated it as homework doesn't count because you can be the student who does, these are my words, nothing all semester, and then you show that you could master the content and you will exceed, you'll meet the expectation. What does that do for motivation for engagement? By contrast, there was at least a few points of view from teachers who attended, one of whom said, this is like a soccer player showing up at the soccer meets. So showing up for soccer practice doesn't mean that you play a good game. And these are two different things. And then one or two teachers articulated a very strong dislike for standards-based grading and felt that they hadn't been adequately engaged. So I think the full array in our case was concern, not just not understanding, but concern expressed by parents as well as teachers. But at least one teacher said he just uses standards-based grading differently. He uses it to inform, but not to drive his outcomes. So it's a little granular, but I want to make sure that it's noted that it was more than just lack of knowledge, but rather an actual feeling of having it reduce engagement. And then by some teachers feeling it was too heavy-handed.
Thank you.
Any other comments? So I want to thank the committee for getting it done so quickly, and just ask the rest of the board if Dr. Malif takes those comments that we've shared with her and incorporates them. Do you need to see this again, or can she just post it and it's complete? All right, so to that end, I have also asked that several documents be posted on the community forum date, which include the slides that were presented, which are excerpts from several of our family engagement reports. I did not have the final slide, which indicated that they were excerpts and that the full documents were available. So they are all posted together. So when this is complete and it's put there and posted together, would one of you from SIFE please send a note to all of the participants? One of the advantages, trying to look at the bright side of these remote times, is that we do have the emails of all the participants, and so they can be alerted that the additional information is there, as well as the summary with this wrap up. I started to do it, and then I realized that since I'm no longer on the committee, it would make more sense for a committee member to do that. Is that all right? I'll send you the information.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Okay, so thank you very, very much, and then we'll also perhaps discuss with communications if there's some other way to also note that this wrap up will be completed when it's completed. All right, 8.5 FinOps.
Yeah, so I just took the status report that we had last time and updated it, and so the updates are mostly in tiny type for you to see in that final corner over there, but just letting everybody know that we've been working on some of our policies, particularly we did a lot on 5404, which is going to be family, maternity, and military caregiver leave, because state law changed and there's a whole new body of state law that needs to be incorporated around around family leave. And we had also asked for the suspension of that sick leave policy, which we did earlier in this meeting, because we don't want to incentivize coming in sick during the time of COVID. Let's see, we're also working on the collective bargaining. That's a short one. And then, working down the list as prioritized. And also we're trying to take hold of the goodness that Francine and I brought back from the WASDA budget workshops. And they gave us some tools that we can use as a board to appropriately oversee the budget. And so we're working on developing that in terms of there's a timeline for when WASDA suggests you do these things, and then as part of that, the board together with the superintendent would come up with a set of guidelines for budget development at the appropriate time in the process. They also gave us some indicators we can look at, and we're learning more about how to read our monthly budget reports. So I'm working on this wiki thing in OneNote where I'm trying to put some of this information, but I got hours of information to put in there now, so I'm a little behind. But we have like a end of the year deadline on that. So anyway, things that we've been working on are noted in here.
Right, and then to just chime on to that, we continue to work with the Superintendent's Advisory Committee.
That's right.
That overlaps with FinOps, and then as well as kind of with our quote executive committee. So Dr. Watson, you also want to say a few words on board development?
I do, but that's in the next part of the program here.
Well, it's actually, it was actually part of this one because it's our executive committee essentially. Yes.
Oh. Okay, because I have it down. I submitted it.
Yeah, I know, but let's just do it.
Okay, so it's down under individual board director updates, so I got it in the wrong spot. But I'm working on the workshop ideas, and you'll notice that if you click on that, it's very outliney. I've got like 3 workshops. They are, I have this document that we had from November 4th, which was the previous ideas on this, and I had what I want to do is go back and make sure I've covered everything on this one into this one, but it looks like we need to change things up just a little bit to fit in the budget work, and also the idea of doing equity pervasive throughout everything. So opening every workshop with an equity learning exercise and not forgetting critical criteria. So roughly we have a vision and strategy workshop, which was on here as a strategic focus workshop. Resource alignment would be the budget thing that I'm proposing. We kind of add to the thing, and then the development. And so anyway, I want to go through and make sure I've covered everything, but this is a basic idea.
Are there any comments on the board development workshop? Anything that anyone really is keen to see? Yeah, Dr. Chu.
I really appreciate this being done. It's really helpful to see where we're kind of heading. I agree that the vision strategy thing is important to start with. I love the idea of the equity. The only piece on equity is to make sure that it doesn't become just an application of equity, that there's actually a development work that is focused on us expanding our understanding of equity, because that's required by 013 OP.
Right, that's what I kept saying. Yeah, we have to. That's why it's a board equity training commitment. But I was going to get with the equity specialists and this the book that I need to read that's on its way to me, that may have whoops, you faded out, that may have some questions or exercises or something we can pull from that to do the kickoff. So to start each meeting, perhaps with, I was saying an hour, but 3 to 4 hours. So that first bit, a good sized chunk, getting us centered on equity, then going into the other work with equity on top of mind.
I love it.
Following up with the critical criteria.
And the only other thing I wanted to add is let Goalcom know how we can help, because we are supposed to be the board liaisons to any strategic planning work. So we would be more than happy to help in any way that we can on that space.
Yeah, so whereas invite Eva to speak about the strategic plan work, I could invite Goalcom to speak about the
No, Eva should speak on it. Okay. Eva should speak on it. We're just a liaison. Like when we come together as a group, we're all working on it. But just let us know what we can do to help.
I don't want to have our Goalcoms. Yeah, I think that's the wrong takeaway.
Yeah. Okay.
I do have something.
Yes, go ahead.
So you asked input for this. I think I see a lot of repetitive themes. I appreciate the equity learning exercise, so that repetition makes sense to me. But I would like to see a session where we talk about what we can, whether we come at it as how do we realign the number of, I would say, data and metric asks that we asking for, or we start from scratch and say, I don't think this is a redo. I think it's a needed exercise to ask, what do we actually need for information to help us do our job as board members? So I would like to do that because I think it's valuable for us. I feel like we are, I've said this before, we are at the pine needle level in terms of getting information and asking for data. And I actually think it's overwhelming and it contributes to a lack of focus. So I'd like to revisit that. The other pieces I did find are focused today on secondary education helpful. I would have liked a board workshop on overall, what do we think successful, let's say, the middle school experience. What does a successful middle school experience look like? What does a successful elementary or high school experience look like? That feels appropriate for a workshop. Tucking in the revamp to the strat plan in a broader meeting, I'm just worried we won't get that much done. We have, you know, our vision and the strat plan all, you know, along with sort of critical criteria review. I guess they all tie to the strat plan, so maybe that's okay. I don't know. I feel like something higher level and very focused for one session is important. So maybe we tie in Ellsbury through something else, but we don't have a session developed just for that. Okay.
So I got two important ideas there. One which I had forgotten about, so I'm glad you reminded me, because I'm totally on board with the idea of this, realign the number of data and metric asks, you know, what do we actually need to do our jobs? And then what do we think is a successful middle school experience? That might be one that we can do in shorter time and fit in a meeting.
And I used middle school as an example, but
yeah.
I would love to talk about that for each of those, elementary, middle, and high school. And I didn't know.
That is the intention. So we were supposed to do that with the SIPs, and it's just been off track. So today was going to be one of those, but we're doing both because it just didn't happen earlier. So we did middle school, we did all of secondary today, but made it an acute time frame because of that. But it's not the only time we're doing it, right? So we're about to go to agenda planning, and that is that we will be continuing to revise the agendas to kind of catch up and rejigger and take into account the feedback that we're getting about discussions and how they're going and what areas we still need to fill in. So certainly some of these I think potentially could fit into study sessions, and some of them will be the larger workshops, and we'll be working through those themes till we get into a good rhythm. And then certainly just to follow up, there is I will be receiving some additional reading material for the break on some of these themes that are brought up, and then we can weave in what is appropriate and, you know, any exercises that go with our board development workshop. And then the idea, certainly there was a lot of good material from WASDA too that we all have access to that might serve also as the basis for some of the work we do, but really trying to intentionally weave equity into the work we do and not just have it separate, but recognizing that we are committed to doing specific development as well. So those are some of the areas that we're going to be exploring.
I think I just got something out of what you were just saying. I think we need the two words, workshop and study session, because study session is more like what you incorporate in a regular meeting, and I was thinking about the big standalone workshops. So. Right. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we'll figure out the nomenclature. So if there isn't anything further, I'm going to say.
I have something I want to build on what Seema said.
Okay.
So the thing that Seema said, there are two things that she said that I think are important, and I would kind of like to echo maybe from a slightly different angle, but this idea of what do we need to do our job, and also how are we streamlining things. We had talked about doing a board workshop on meetings, like how we can make our meetings most effective. And I think like if we combined those things together, that might be really helpful. I also think that it's last time we did the board self-evaluation piece in July. And if we did that again this year, if we let that slip to July, because that's something that we don't need to have done before the end of the school year, that we could then use that May meeting to do sort of that the space of, and maybe even do it a little earlier, but talk about like the streamlining of reporting and how we use our meeting time and what we need to do the work might be a worthy endeavor.
All right, so thanks everyone for the input. We'll continue to work and iterate on that. I said the piece about agenda planning. We will be working on trying to get the agendas together further out with the outline of what the study sessions, the general topics are, so people can have a good overview. Is there anything, we heard earlier a request potentially about curriculum. If there's anything else that you have on your mind right now, let me know. Otherwise, it's certainly something that you can email me later. With that, 8.7 is written reports. It didn't seem like there was anything that needed an announcement. Does anyone have an announcement, something that's time sensitive for people to attend or participate in? Okay, so seeing none of those, we're going to move to item 9, which is our executive session. It should be fairly short. I'm going to read the purpose of the executive session. Directors, you may already go into that room.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Okay, so the purpose of this executive session will be to evaluate the qualifications of an applicant for public employment or to review the performance of a staff member. However, discussion of salaries, wages, and other conditions of employment to be generally applied within the district will occur in a meeting open to the public, and when the board elects to take the final action of hiring, setting the salary of an individual staff member or class of staff members, or discharging or disciplining an employee, that action will be taken in a meeting open to the public. We will adjourn immediately after the conclusion of the executive session. No further action will be taken in this meeting. I will come back and check in. The original time for this executive session was slated for 30 minutes. We will attempt to be done by 8:30. We'll curtail it and attempt to be done by 8:30 p.m. Thank you.
It's 8:30. The board requires an additional 5 minutes for the meeting. They will return in 5 minutes if they need more time and request that time then. Otherwise, they will adjourn the meeting.
All right. This concludes our board meeting. We are at the end. The meeting is adjourned.